Hey yo, so recently there's been some discussions regarding betting markets becoming assassination markets, specifically this market right here, which reads Will Palisades wildfire spread to Santa Monica by Sunday? And you can either bet yes or no. And based on the current odds of it happening, if you bet yes here, you would get you would profit a lot more from this if it were to resolve to yes. Now, I wanted to make a real proper video, but I gave up. So it is just going to be a ramble. So sorry about that. But let's look at the main concern, which is that okay, a market like this would incentivize someone to bet yes here and then go out and execute the arson themselves. And so they pocket the money, right? So this tweet right here by Molly White asking, what could go wrong with running betting markets like this? Now, this is kind of a misconception with incentives. Yes, there is incentive to do that here if you were to bet yes, but then you have to outweigh the risk of getting caught by police because that's illegal. And also you need to also take into account the liquidity. So here there's like only 89K liquidity, right? So if I were to want to make a lot of money, even if I bet like $10,000, I will only get $13,000. Is that worth it? The risk, me going against doing arson and then trying to run from arguably the most powerful law enforcement in the world? Probably not, right? So this is in the case of low liquidity. Now, what if, hypothetical, what if the liquidity were to be higher? Let's think about the actors that would play in this market, right? So number one, you would have people who are speculators, right? So these guys do not have any skin in the game. They just want to make some money. And number two, you have people who have houses in Santa Monica. And what they can do is they can buy yes they can buy yes here. And if the house does go on fire, then sure, they lose their house, but they can earn some money from that. So this is like insurance, right? I wouldn't say it is insurance. We'll talk about that in a bit, but this is like insurance. Now, another category of person you have is from this tweet, Molly White here, which says, then again, if the market swings far enough to yes, perhaps we'll end up with a volunteer fire brigade made up of crypto degens. So this makes sense, right? Let's say here we have a peak of 91% chance that the fire would spread to Santa Monica. So what someone can do is, if they have the resources, they can bet no here. So they bet against the market and then they physically go out and try to reduce the fire or put down the fire so that this market resolves to a no. And so this is another actor that would make sense in this space, right? So let's say we have someone who is we'll put it as private firefighter. Okay, and then you have the last category, which is arsonists. So this is the one that we are mainly concerned about, which is betting yes here at 8% and then going out and executing the arson themselves and trying to get away with the police. Now, if we discussed about the liquidity, right? There isn't enough liquidity to really justify you risking shit like that. Okay, but what if the liquidity was really high? Now, my thinking is that these categories have different barriers of execution. So what I mean by barrier is that barrier is a mixture of effort and success. So what do I mean by that? For example, speculators, they have low barriers. Why? They can just bet and then they sit on their ass just in their house, and then whatever the market resolves to, they will get money or lose money, right? Insurance, the same thing. You might have a house in Santa Monica, so you can just bet yes, and then evacuations, do your preparations, and then the market resolves. Yeah. Middle barrier is you need to execute effort. You need to, let's say for the private firefighters, they need to go out and try to put down the fire. They need to have resources, and it's not 100% success rate, right? Unless they're really skilled, I don't know. It depends. So unless they're really sure they can put down the fire, then that kind of this would have a middle barrier, right? And then finally you have the high barrier, which is the arsonist. Why? Because they have to go out, they have to execute the arson, and then they have to try and run away from law enforcement, right? So because there's different barriers, depending when based if the liquidity changes, let's say as the liquidity increases, I would argue that people who are in the low barriers here are the ones who would push the price to the correct odds. For example, if the liquidity were to be really high, and this is 8% chance, right? Then it makes sense for insurance people to buy, because then let's say they can buy like 100,000 and they can get like maybe a 4x, 5 times, 6 times out of their investment, right? Or out of their insurance, quote unquote. Then this would make sense for when the market is at 8% with very high liquidity. Now, so my thinking is that the insurance people will be the ones to step up first, and what happens is they'll push the odds back to something like 50-50. Okay, so you can't think of like, oh, then if there's highly liquid and it's 8% chance, oh, the arsonist will have the maximum incentive to carry out the arson. No, because before that, if there's enough liquidity, then it will be attractive for the insurance people to actually bet yes and possibly get the insurance and protect their investment, right? Now, on top of that, you have the speculators who think that the insurance people will step in, and so they buy first, right? So now you have a double effect here, where speculators, they think that another actor will do something and they bet based on that. Okay, so now you have this double action of actually pushing the odds to where something it becomes like 50%. Now, once it's at 50%, then even though it's in a high liquid market, it's only a 50% like increase. So in 50%, if it's very liquid, right, you would get a maximum 2 times, like a 2x on your investment. And so again, if it's highly liquid at 8%, you can get like 10 times, right? But if it's at 50%, it's only at 2 times. So what happens is the incentives for the arsonist, as liquidity goes up, the incentives for the arsonist stays the same, because now the returns are less. Sure, you can put more money into it, but the returns percentage-wise are less. And I would argue that that actually still makes the incentives for the arsonists not as attractive, because they still need to successfully run from law enforcement in order to enjoy their money, right? That's one thing. Now, we can also look at another hypothetical, which is that what if the arsonist in a high liquidity market was able to catch this trade right here, which is 7% yes, in a very highly liquid market. So what happens? So the arsonist would be like, okay, it's 7% chance. Yeah, assume it's a high liquidity market. So he says, I'm going to buy, I'm going to go cause arson, right? But like we discussed just now, because there's low barrier actors within this market, what they'll do is they will push the odds up because it's attractive already for them to do things like this, to speculate that, oh, insurance people will buy, and insurance people do buy to push the odds up. Now, because the arsonist would go from 7%, and then the insurance people and low barrier actors will push the odds up to 50%, the arsonist is already in profit. If he's already in profit, why not he just sell the thing and that's it? He doesn't have to commit the arson. And so you can see that even though it looks attractive, over time, market forces will push the incentives against the arsonists for them to not do the arson. And on top of that, it's illegal, right? So this is something that I just want to clarify. There's another tweet that I saw here, is that in all seriousness, this should be 100% illegal. That's not big government telling people what they should or shouldn't do with their money. That's saying you shouldn't be incentivized to burn out Santa Monica to take yourself out of a gambling debt. So this is one thing. One thing is that we talked about it here, right? The liquidity is not worth it for an arsonist to execute. If there is liquidity, then other players who have lower barrier of being successful in the market will step in first. And that causes an equalization of the odds such that the arsonist still doesn't have, enough returns to do the arson. Another thing is that this kind of thinking is not 100% correct. Why? Because in any market, you have ways that are illegal to insider trading, right? So I would say this is considered insider trading. But yeah, even though people can do insider trading, which in this case is doing the arson themselves, or maybe in the case of a normal stock, you have information inside the company that isn't public yet, then you can do the trade, but that's illegal. That's insider trading, right? Just because they can do something illegal doesn't mean that stocks in general, doesn't mean that shorting in general should also be illegal. Doesn't mean that insurance also uh, has to be illegal, right? So this is one thing that I saw an issue with this tweet. Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about is this tweet right here, which asks, or which states, last I checked, I could anonymously take out crop insurance on someone else's farm. And so people were doing equivalents to credit default swaps, right? So if you remember, credit default swaps are basically people betting that mortgage payers will default on their credit, right? So it's different from insurance. You need to understand Polymarket is different from insurance. You need to understand that the money that you earn from betting is coming out of the pockets of those who bet against you. So if you were to win in a yes bet, you will be taking money from people who bet no, and this money is already being put into this market. It isn't like promised. So in insurance terms, if I pay the premiums monthly, if something were to happen to me, the insurance must pay me the money, right? But it's not clear that they have that money, or they do not, the insurance guys, they do not think that all insurance will default, right? They only think like only a small percentage of insurance will they need to pay out. But in terms of Polymarket, everyone who bets no understands that they will lose all the money, and all the money goes to people who bet yes. This is different from insurance. Insurance, the insurers promise you the money, and when it happens, then they pay you, right? And there are cases where they can't pay you, and in the case of credit default swaps, yeah, everyone, the people who were selling credit default swaps, they just got, the biggest losses ever, right? So this is one difference. So that's just my opinion on it. Yep. Thanks.